Dark Lens Studios. At the edge of West Antarctica lies an enormous river of ice. It is roughly the size of Great Britain. Its ice reaches nearly 2 kilometers thick in some places. And every year, it sends enormous quantities of ice toward the ocean. Its name is Thwaites Glacier, but you may know it by another, far more disturbing name, the Doomsday Glacier. And the reason for that nickname isn't because scientists believe it will suddenly disappear tomorrow. The real danger is much slower, and potentially much more important. Thwaites is already retreating, and beneath this enormous glacier, something is happening that we cannot easily see from the surface. The ocean is reaching underneath the ice. Thwaites does not simply sit on top of Antarctica like an enormous block of ice. Much of it rests on bedrock that lies below sea level. Eventually, the glacier reaches a point where the ice leaves the seafloor and begins to float. Scientists call this boundary the grounding line, and this is one of the most important places in the entire glacier. Relatively warm ocean water can reach beneath the ice and interact with the glacier from below. As ice is lost and the grounding zone retreats inland, more of the glacier can become exposed to the ocean. And here is where the geography beneath Thwaites becomes especially important. In many areas, the bedrock gets deeper as you travel farther inland. That means retreat can potentially expose thicker ice to ocean water, creating conditions that could allow further retreat. Above the ice, satellites watch these changes from space. But scientists wanted to know what was happening underneath it. So researchers drilled through hundreds of meters of Antarctic ice and sent instruments into one of the most inaccessible environments on Earth. An underwater robot called IceFin traveled beneath the floating ice. What it revealed was a strange, frozen landscape: cracks, crevasses, terraces, and places where ocean water interacts directly with the glacier. Research has shown that melting beneath Thwaites is complicated. Some relatively flat areas melt more slowly than scientists once expected, but cracks and steep surfaces can experience much stronger melting. The glacier is not disappearing uniformly. It is being reshaped from underneath. And scientists are still working to understand exactly how quickly that process could change in the future. So, what would actually happen if Thwaites were eventually lost? First, there is an important detail. When floating ice melts, it does not directly raise sea level very much, because it is already floating in the ocean. The bigger problem is the enormous amount of ice sitting on land behind it. Floating ice can help resist the movement of grounded ice toward the sea. If that resistance weakens, ice farther inland can flow toward the ocean more quickly. And once grounded ice enters the ocean, global sea level rises. If the entire Thwaites Glacier were eventually lost, scientists estimate that it contains enough ice to raise global mean sea level by around 65 centimeters, or roughly 2 feet. But that isn't the only reason scientists are concerned. Thwaites sits within the much larger West Antarctic ice sheet. Its retreat could influence neighboring glaciers and affect the stability of a much larger region of Antarctica. That does not mean the entire West Antarctic ice sheet will suddenly collapse. These processes can unfold over centuries, but if much larger portions of West Antarctica were eventually destabilized, the long-term sea level consequences could be measured in meters, and a change of that scale would redraw coastlines around the world. Low-lying communities would face increasingly frequent flooding. Storm surges would reach farther inland. Coastal infrastructure would become more difficult and expensive to protect, and millions of people living near coastlines would have to adapt to a world with a different shoreline. But there is another important part of this story. Thwaites is not expected to completely collapse tomorrow. Scientists studying the glacier say a full collapse is unlikely within the next few decades. The concern is what happens over the 21st century, the 22nd century, and beyond. Because glaciers this large do not respond on human timescales alone, changes happening today can influence the planet for generations. That is why scientists continue traveling to one of the coldest and most dangerous places on Earth. They drill through the ice. They send robots beneath glaciers. They study the ocean. They map the hidden bedrock. And satellites continue watching from hundreds of kilometers above, all to answer one enormous question: how much ice will Thwaites lose? And how quickly will it happen? The Doomsday Glacier is not a countdown clock to the end of the world. It is something more scientifically important than that. It is a warning. that some of the greatest changes happening to our planet can begin silently, beneath kilometers of ice, far away from the cities that will eventually feel their effects. And what happens in this remote corner of Antarctica may help shape coastlines for centuries to come. Dark Lens Studios.